Okay, now, I'm gonna get a question answered real quick for me. On this program, it talks about, can a person support Black Lives Matter than police? At the same time, my presentation was based upon the flyer that, so I need to, if I go one direction, it's a point of no return, so.
Let's go with the flyer.
You do whatever you want to do.
It's 10 minutes.
You do whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Do use the mic.
Starting with going to lunch.
I've never had a problem speaking loud enough. Forgive me for my height. I feel like I'm being discriminated against. Well, I won't go through the slides, but one of the things that I'd like to start off by saying that I grew up here. I was born in Our Lady of Angels Hospital, which is the only hospital in 1960 that a black child could be born in within 75 miles of this Pensacola area. My address was number 25 Addicts Court. I attended Escambia High School during the 1976 riots. I was a sophomore on the campus. I left Pensacola and went to college in Atlanta, Georgia. I came back in 1983, and no, I'm sorry, 82. And in 83, I became hired as a police cadet, public safety cadet with the Pensacola Police Department. And I've been working there ever since. So when you talk about racial tensions and cooling the fire, supporting racial equality in police, one of the things I think we have to do is recognize that the issue of race is an American dilemma. We confront issues of race in terms of distributive justice. We confront issues of race in terms of retributive justice. We confront issues of race in terms of the administration of both distributive and retributive. When we talk about distributive, you're talking about the basic needs a person needs to survive. You're talking about having access to housing, employment, basic education opportunities, and access to health and medical care. Now these issues are clearly defined to us today through disparities that will often turn up in studies. And these disparities along the lines of race, equality, affordability, accessibility are common factors. And being fairly distributed is usually what the question is. Are people getting access to things they need to survive on a day-to-day basis? And when they are not, that's when life gets chaotic. That's when the homeless guy will come into your store and steal from you. That's when a hungry person will come into your store, whether they're homeless or not, and take something that's not theirs. And there's a social theory for criminal behavior called the strain theory. And the theory is that when our lives are strained in terms of survival, and we resort to things where they're illegal or unlawful, then that becomes normal for you. So then the way you survive day to day is not normal to be a functioning person in society. And so that's why you have all these different arguments and debates about whether poverty causes crime. So then when we get a person in a crisis and now they're in the justice system, we deal with the issues in retributive justice that are centered around criminal profiles versus racial profiles. fair and impartial policing? Is it done equally across the board to everyone that violates this, or are there some disparities in how this law or this ordinance will be enforced? The court filing, will there ever be charges filed officially? And sentencing, will they go outside of sentencing guidelines, or will there be provisions inside of sentencing guidelines that allows you to be harsher in some situations as opposed to others? And is this a practice across the board? Hiring and promoting and assigning police officers. All these things, there's a correlation between the disparities in people being able to get goods and services that they need to survive, and the high rates of violent crimes, particularly in minority communities. So the question is, how do we support racial equality and the police? Number one, you have to realize that there are three things basically we can do. Number one is admit, number two is to submit, and number three is to commit. Admit means that we have to recognize the fact that racial issues still exist in America, not just because people are prejudiced, but because they have failed to support changes that provide equal opportunities for all citizens. We have to recognize that some people's lives have taken bad courses because of circumstances and situations that they have encountered. And when you understand the ACE studies, adverse childhood experience, and what an ACE score means in terms of trauma-informed care and having things spiral out of control in your life, then you can see how life can be chaotic for some and pretty easy for others. So you got to admit that these problems exist. And that's something that a lot of times we allow politics to dictate where we stand, because politics will not allow you to be objective. You're going to have to be on one side or the other. And that's why when that question was posed on the program, can a person be a part of Black Lives Matter and Police Lives Matter at the same time? And my answer is no, because it doesn't allow you when you're choosing to be neutral. And the unfortunate thing, when you're dealing with race and reconciliation, there's no neutral position. Either you believe everyone's lives matter, or you don't. And so when we get into this discussion, it's divisive. And of course, when it's played out in public media, it becomes totally unhealthy. Because if you notice, every time you look at it on Facebook or on the news, your blood pressure goes up. You start to breathing hard, nostrils contracting and expanding, because it has an emotional effect, because you're on one side or the other. And even in discussions, trying to be neutral and trying to find common ground, it's hard, because the discussion to be one or the other is not going to allow you to do that. And that's why a lot of times I'm asked, well, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that? And sometimes you have to ask yourself, why would a person ask me that? Because sometimes people are trying to figure out whose side are you on. And if we're all human beings, the thing about it is we have to realize that your life is no more important than my life is. And if I'm going to serve and protect the public, then my life has to be valuable enough that it's recognized, and I shouldn't have to argue, or no one should else have to argue that point. So when we say we admit, we're recognizing that these problems exist. And when we submit ourselves to the process, we're moving from anger and guilt to passion and conviction. Your mind has to be made up. You know, I can't make you want something you don't want, and we can't force something to be that you're not going to allow to be. And that means, just like I have expectations, there are also expectations of me. I wouldn't want you to wonder what kind of an officer am I when I respond to your call for service. So that means I have to be transparent. That means my actions have to line up with an acceptable standard. that cannot be wavered. And that's no different between relationship between citizens in our community. That trust level has to be that we are committed to a standard that cannot be compromised. And as we deal with the issue of race, not only here in this community, but also in this country, you gotta be committed, you gotta be committed. So under submission, you gotta recognize that pain caused by stormy racial history is the first step to reconciliation process. You can't pretend that this stuff never happened. And every now and then we see examples of sheer hate. And we have to do one or two things. Either we accept it as it is or reject it. And denial only postpones the problem for another while until the next situation comes up. We have to engage in dialogue. We have to examine ourselves. We have to increase cultural understanding. And that's why I say it's just more than being aware that there are different cultures. You have to understand that there are a lot of differences in cultures, but also there are a lot of things that are common among all cultures. And respect has always been a very easy to identify standard in all cultures. Learn to serve diverse communities. Sometimes, it's like giving a gift. If you don't know a person, can you really give them a gift? If I brought you flowers, you have a bad allergy problem. Did I really do something to help you? Whether it's my intentions or not, my heart may have been in the right place, but I tried to do something before I really knew who you were. Supporting trust building between police and communities and the citizens that live in these communities. You have to ask yourself, do I understand how explicit and implicit bias plays into the history of racial tensions in Pensacola? Am I part of the problem because of the way I think, or part of the solution? Do I, myself, need racial healing before I go any further? One of the worst things we can do is when we're having a hard time dealing with an issue, try to tell somebody else we're going to help them. We have to deal with it from within first. Know where you are. There may have been some experiences. Sometimes people don't understand, but even to be called a racist is a bad encounter for a person that was not and is not. It's like being called a liar or a thief. We always used to say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt. But we were lying. Words hurt. So commit yourself. Be a reconciler. Deal with the controlling emotion called fear. Sometimes the fear of being wrong. Sometimes the fear of just not knowing and not having enough to go on to say one way or the other. One of the things I said in my acceptance speech as chief of police that I wish that the community and law enforcement will wait till all the facts are in before rushing to judgment. Because words that come out of our mouths are like bullets. Once you shoot them, they do damage. Once they do damage, I'm sorry, it's usually not enough. So you have to choose your words very carefully and make sure that you're not rushing based on your emotions, or you're not retaliating out of some fears that you have. Correct the perception of seeing people, black people, homeless people, people that are different from you, white people, as predators. Once you look at somebody as a predator, you never see them as a human being. And once you stop seeing a person as a human being, then in your mind, your heart, you have justified any way you choose to treat them. Practice playing the grace card instead of the race card. Sometimes that's the easiest cop-out in the world. And you have to check yourself. Sometimes the media will give you a story and they never give you the race. And you sit there all night long. I wonder what color was it. Healing has to start from within, which will mean we all have to challenge ourselves, find out where you are. Building trusting relationships through transparency and procedural justice. That's whether it's distributive or retributive. If you're working in a position and your job is to make sure people get the services and goods they need, then you should do that. And your politics shouldn't have nothing to do with whether you do it right. You know, one of the things that I learned that was very difficult is when I had to explain to my daughter, when she was 3 years old, why a little girl said to her on the playground in preschool that I can't play with you because you're black. She says, I'm not black, Dad, I'm brown. That was the longest evening I ever had in my life. To sit down and try to tell this child that C, nothing but another kid on the playground, try to explain to her what racism is all about. And as we get older, society teaches us things that's not good for our kids. At this point in time in our history, we need to understand that if we don't make some serious decisions about where we're going with the issue of race, academics is not going to come to the crisis. And that's why this is something that's near and dear to my heart, because it's a subtle problem. A whole lot of people don't like to talk about it. But to me, it's like terminal cancer. Because